So today we are going to discuss about document understanding with generative capabilities. And before I go to further slides, let me introduce myself. I'm Usha Kiran Kanagula. I have overall 6+ years of IT experience, in which 4+ years of experience as a RPA developer at Miracle Software Systems. So I have a hands-on experience on few of the important products of UiPath, like document understanding, Action Center, AI Center, and the UiPath apps. So few of my important achievements throughout the RPA journey is I'm a most valuable professional for the year 2023. UiPath certified professional, UiPath community tech speaker, forum robot master, and UiPath community blogger. So before we go to further slides, let's quickly go through our agenda. So we will start with document understanding introduction, and then what are the steps involved in document understanding, and then we will talk about generative capabilities, right? And what are the document types that can be handled using generative classifier and extractor. So followed by, we will be looking into the action center component, and then live demo followed by Q&A. So let's start with what is document understanding, right? So it is inbuilt with AI powered skills. So where actually we can process the data from end to end. So it can handle large volume of documents, like, it could be your invoices, it could be pay slips, it could be electricity bill, or it could be something receipts, or it could be something called, credit memo. So whatever the document might be, but it helps you to actually interpret, extract, and then process your data. So the RPA plus document understanding so will actually make our workflows more flexible and then gives the output in a more efficient way and also more accurate, right? So eventually, for beginners who don't know about the document understanding, so let me explain you in a single line statement. So this document understanding is used to process the documents. Getting it? So process the documents. It could be PDF or image or handwritten or whatever it is. But it is used to process the documents by using different concepts in it. So we will going to discuss all those in our next slides. So hope this slide helps person who are beginning with the document understanding. So you should be able to understand what is this. Now let's quickly move to the next one. So these are the document understanding steps. So the very first step that we see is load taxonomy. So here we actually define the fields, right? So this is the generic document understanding steps. If you have already worked on UiPath.intelligent.OCR.activities package, so you see all these stages. But again, I will explain. But these were the, I would say that these were the steps related to UiPath.document understanding.activities package process. Okay. So the very first step that we have to do is load taxonomy. So we have to define the fields. What are the fields that we want to extract? And that fields will be defining in the taxonomy manager. The next one is digitize. So we are converting the document to a human readable format. Getting it? So now, if you have already used this digitization in your workflows, so if you look at the output, so what is the output, guys? So the output is document object model. So if you observe the digitization output, so that is document object model. And if you print that document object model in a notepad, so it will give the all details specific to that document, like what is the document type and what are the fields in it, right? And what is the confidence score of each field. So everything comes in detail. So now based upon that output, now the bot will going to classify the document. So classify is nothing but identifying the document. So is it an invoice, or is it a credit memo, or is it an electricity bill, or is it something, right? So that actually happens in the classification stage. Now the next step is extraction. So here the bot will going to extract the required fields. And then finally, we are exporting the data from a data set to a data table. So this is all about the steps. Now, do you think this is pretty straightforward? Okay. Think of this way. What happens when the bot not able to classify the document? What happens when the bot not able to classify the document? So classifying is nothing but not able to identify. So what document type it is? If the bot not able to identify that, what will happen? Let's take another scenario. So what happens if the bot not able to extract the data? So should we stop the process at that time? No, right, guys? So the process should be continuing without, pausing or without stopping the process. So now we will talk about those steps. Okay. So now, once the bot not able to classify the data, I mean, if the bot not able to identify the type of the document, then what we can do? So we can actually send for human validation. Okay, so we can actually send for human validation, and we are taking the help from human to classify the document, and then we are retraining. So we can retrain the classifiers based upon the human validated data. Okay, so there is something called ML classifiers. So if you have already used a ML model, so there is something called ML classifier. So every time the bot, can't work as expected, right? So some of the cases, the bot might not able to identify the document. Now what we can do? So we can actually send to the human for validation that case, and then we can retrain the classifier using the human validated data. We can retrain the classifier using what? Human validated data. Getting it? So this is another way of retraining. Okay, if not, so I don't want to retrain, so that is okay. So if the bot not able to classify, that is fine, so I can send it to human for review, and then I want to continue with the next steps. In that case, what you can do is you can send to the human validation, and then we can actually go to a next stage or next step. Okay, so if you don't need retraining, that is also fine. You can directly send that invoice to the human validation for classification, and then we can quickly jump to a next stage. But if you if you want to retrain, then what you have to do? First of all, we have to send that document to the human for validation, and then we can retrain the classifier based upon the human validated data. Getting it? So now let's move on to one next stage, which is extraction. So what happens if the bot not able to extract the data? How would we handle that case? Again, should we stop the process? No, correct? So now again, what we are doing here, so we are sending that invoice to action center. So I'm going to tell you how, we can discuss in detail the action center component and all. But right now, let's remember only the action center, okay? So if the bot not able to extract the data, then it will be sending to action center for human review. Again, if you want to retrain it, right? So if you want to retrain it, so we can do that using a human validated data. So what we are trying to retrain here, the extraction, So based upon the human validated data, we can retrain the extraction. Getting it? So the model, if you're already aware of ML model, the ML model will going to learn from the human validated data. So that is why we have included the retraining step here. Okay. So again, I don't want to retrain anyway. So I just want to go with the next steps. If that is the case, if the bot not able to extract, just simply send it to a action center for human validation, and then quickly go to a next step. That's it. Okay. So again I'm telling, so if the bot not able to classify, you can send to the human for review, and then we can retrain the classifier. So if you don't want to retrain the classifier, you can simply send it to a human for review, and then you can jump to a next stage or next step. So what happens if the extraction is not happened? So again, we can send to the document for human review, and then we can retrain the extractor. So that way we can retrain the extractor, right? The platform will able to learn from the human validated data. Okay. So again, I don't want to retrain any extractors. Then what is the case? Just simply send the invoice to the human review, right? Then quickly jump to a next step or next stage. So this is the document understanding steps currently with what is the package name? VFS.intelligent OCR.activities. So now you understand the complete design, right? Now quickly move to the next stage. Next slide, sorry. So now we will see the generative capabilities. So initially we have started with what is DU and what are the steps present in the document understanding. Now we will talk about generative capabilities. Now let's understand the challenge first. So before we go to a generative capabilities, let's understand the challenge. Classifying and extracting documents can be challenging and time consuming when dealing with unstructured documents. Isn't it, guys? So if I go to the previous slide, so we are doing a lot of steps here. So we are actually using taxonomy manager to define the fields. And then we are using some OCRs within the digitization stage. And for again, we are just training and then configuring a lot of steps for classification and extraction, right? So this is actually time consuming and also the challenging one. Now, to avoid such kind of challenges, VFAth has come up with a new package called Document Understanding. I would say that VFAth dot document understanding dot activities. I will show you. Okay, once we shift to a studio, I will show you that package. That package, what that package contains? Generative capabilities. So again, generative capabilities in the sense what? So it contains generative classifier and extractor activities. Okay. So now what it will do. Okay, so we are saying generative capabilities and then generative classifier extractor. So we are talking a lot of words, but what actually it is? So this is something called, so the moment we give some data, right? So it will be sending to a GPT, correct? In the background, it is happening. So we can't see all those steps. So the moment we start processing the data, it will be sending to a GPT with a single request. So that is called a generative capabilities. Getting it, guys? So the moment we give a data, it will be sending to a GPT in the background through API, and in return we will get the output. So with a single request, so that we call it as the generative capabilities, right? And again, these activities enables the user to input through a prompt. So it just gives a small window, so where actually we can configure the key value pairs. I'm going to show you that. But here understand the what is mean by generative capabilities. The data that user gives will be sending to a GPT with a single request. So that is called a generative capabilities, right? So now you understand why generative capabilities comes into a picture. So what is the challenge? So what is the problem statement and why we are using a generative capabilities? So you are clear, right? Now let's move to the next slide. Now we will see what are the document types can be handled using generative extractor. So in the right side, if you see, there is some window. So where we have a keys and the values. So this is how actually we configure with generative extractor activity. Again, we will be talking in detail, but we need not to train the document. We need not to do any labeling. We need not to do any additional configurations. All you have to do is just configure the key value pairs. So I'm going to show you, don't worry. Now we will see what are the document types can be handled using this activity. The very first one is, the scanned, and the next one is handwritten, and the next one is invoice. So that means this generative extractor can handle both structured and unstructured documents. Getting it? Now you clear. So if I'm going with the generative capabilities, what documents should I use? So you are clear with that, right? So now let's quickly move to the next way. So which is Action Center. So now what is Action Center? It is a central portal where it enables human in loop to validate or approve or report as exceptions. Now quickly understand this by taking a small scenarios. Okay. So now my bot is processing PDFs, or I would say let's take invoices. Okay. Now for few of the invoices, the bot not able to extract the data. Okay, for some reason the bot not able to extract the data. Now should I stop the process or should I continue? It doesn't make any sense if I stop the process, right? So now in this case, there should be some component which helps, or I would say which enables human in loop, so that the human can validate the data or correct the data and then send back to a robot. So that is where the action center comes in. Okay. So if the bot not able to extract few of the fields, now we should not process it, guys, right? So if we process it again, we will run into some major issues. So that is why in that case, we can send the invoice to Action Center for the human validation. And once the human validated, so it will be again sending to the robot again. Now the robot will pick that invoice and then it will continue from where it left off. So this is the first scenario. Now you understand, now you got a basic understanding, right? So when we can use Action Center. Now let's take a second scenario, which is, so I'm processing some purchase orders. Okay. So I'm processing some purchase orders in SAP. So we might be already aware of this PO processing in SAP. So I need to get approval from a business user or from a business or a user or a customer. So whatever. Okay. So now what should I do? Without getting approval, should I run my automation? No, right? Even in this case, we can use Action Center. So whenever we need some approval or to approve the purchase order before we actually run our automation in SAP, so we can send that invoice to Action Center, and then we can wait until the human validate the data. So once the validation completes, again that invoice will be sending back to a robot, from where the robot picks, and then it continues from next step. Getting it? So this is the second scenario. Now let's take a different scenario. The third scenario would be, my use case is only to process invoices, but for somehow the bot has received some electricity bills or a different document it has received. Now what should I do? So now again, I can send that invoice to Action Center. Get it? I can send that invoice to Action Center for the human validation. Now the human can make it as exception, and again, it will be back to a robot, and the robot will continue with the next steps. So these are the different scenarios that we can use Action Center. So simply in a single statement, I can say, if your use case need any human involvement, then go for Action Center. That's it. No matter it is a approval, or is it something called reporting, or it's something called validation or correction, or whatever it is. So if your use case needs a human involvement, just go with Action Center. Fine. So now let's move on to our next slide. Now we will see live demo on understanding generative classifier. Okay. And then we will see how to retrieve the classification results. And then followed by, we will look into the how generative extractor works, and then how to retrieve the extracted data. So finally, we will be using Action Center component. Okay. So far what we have discussed. So the very first slide that we have discussed is what is document understanding? What are the steps? Right? So what are the steps involved in document understanding? So the next slide is, if you understand the second slide, right? So then you will be understanding the generative capabilities part, because the challenges that we see in the second slide. So to avoid these challenges, the UiPath has come up with the generative capabilities concept. And then later, we have gone through what are the document types, what are the different document types that can be handled using generative extractor. And next, we have understand the Action Center component. Now let's build, a simple workflow by combining all these concepts. Okay, so let's quickly get into the UiPath Studio. So this is my studio. The very first task that you have to do is install, what is the package name? UiPath dot document understanding dot activities. This is the one. Okay, so you should not install UiPath dot intelligent OCR dot activity. So that is different. So this is the recent package. Okay, so make sure you install 2.3.1 preview. Okay, fine. So once you install this, so you will be finding the or I would say search for document in your activities panel. Okay, so there were a few of the activities coming up. So there were also the PDF activities available, but for now let's focus on this generative concepts. So we will start with classify document. So let's get that activity into the workspace. Now you may ask, Usha, so don't we use taxonomy manager, or don't we use digitization or OCR? No guys, you don't need to do all those stuff. So I already told you. So the generative capabilities, in the sense, the user provided input will be sending to a GPT in the background with a single request. You don't need to do any additional configurations. You don't need to label the documents. You don't need to maintain any training data set. You don't need to even upload the documents to some AI center and all, right? So let's work with classified document first, and select the project as predefined. So it shows the predefined from the drop down. And the next one is classifier. So since we are focusing on gen capabilities, so let's select generative classifier preview. Very nice. The moment I select this, you see something called prompt, right? So just open this, and then we have to provide the key value. So how we have to provide, I will let you know. Okay. So first of all, I will give the key as invoice. Okay. So I'm asking to a GPT. Okay. So document is the document is invoice is the document is invoice, right? So I'm asking to a GPT. So as like I mentioned, during execution, when I start the execution, it will be sending to a GPT or large language model in the background, and then they will get an output. That's it. So we don't need to do any additional configurations. So I have given the key as invoice, and the value is the document is invoice. So once you're done with the configuration, click on save. Very nice. Now the next one is input field. So before I provide the input, so hover your mouse here and then read the message what it says. So it is saying retrieve the input file by using activities like download email attachments or download file from Google Drive. So there were only two sources, guys. One is you can download the email attachments and then pass to this field. And the second one is you can download file from the Google Drive. Now you may ask, Usha, so is there any way that we can loop through files in a folder? There is no such capability right now. Okay, so you can download the email attachments and then send as an input or from files from a Google Drive. Okay, so before I go with the input, so let's show you what are the files available here. So the very first one is, okay, the very first one is invoice. So if you see, it has couple of data like invoice number, due date, total, and the table data. And the other one is, this is also an invoice, but the format is completely different. This is, these two are comes with a different template. So this is different and the previous one is different. Now let's look at the third one. So this is some sort of certificate. It's not an invoice. Okay. Now we will be using these three files for our demo purpose. Now what I want to do is, so let's go back to a studio. So here we have to provide the input. So for this session, so I will go with the Google Drive. So for that, again, you have to install G Suite activities. So search for G Suite and then you will find something called Google Workspace. Google Workspace. Okay, install this package. And then for now, I have installed 2.2.6, so which is a stable version. Okay, but you can also try with the preview one. So that's depends on your wish. So I have already installed the package. Now let's search for Google. Okay, so with the moment I search for Google, you see a lot of activities coming up. Now I will go with the activity called download. Very nice. So here, if you see, my account has been taken by default because I have already configured my Drive account. If you're not yet configured, so what you have to do is log into your automation cloud first. Okay, and then go back to a, I would say, integration service. So the moment you click here, you see your integration service. Now here there is an issue comes. So most of the people says, Usha, I can't see integration service tab. I can't see actions tabs. The reason for that is you might not enable the services. So to enable the service, click here, then go to admin tab, and then click on the respective tenant and go to services. Okay, and then click on add service. So if you have not enabled the service like actions or something like integration service, just make sure you check so that those services will be enabled. Getting it? So this is how you have to enable the service. Very nice. So once you enable it, so go to the integration service. Okay, and then go to connections page. This is the one. Go to connections page and then click on add connection. And the moment I click on add connection, it asks me to search for the connected type. So I will say as Google Drive. So select this. Okay. Now it will take you to the authentication page. Click on connect so that you will be connecting to a respective Google Drive account. So this is the process of step. Getting it? So this is how we can configure our Google Drive account. Very nice. Now let's go back to our studio. I have already configured. So once your configuration is done from UiPath Automation Cloud, then you can see your account in the drop. So just select the respective one. Okay. And again, I would like to mention a point here. So most of the people were thinking that this complete web application is a orchestrated. It's incorrect, guys. It is not a orchestrator. We call it as a UiPath Automation Cloud. Orchestrator is only part of the automation cloud. Okay, so this is the orchestrator and this is a part of the automation cloud. But this entire thing is not a orchestrator. So remember this point. Let me close this and go back to a studio. So here, the moment I configure Google account, so you can actually browse for the file. So I'll click on the folder and this is the file that I would like to select. Okay, so let me show what is this file, the very first one, which is the invoice. So I'm going to select that file here, click on save. Perfect, very nice. Okay, now can we pass the output of this activity as an input? So that is what we want, right? So download file means it will be downloading the file. So that output we will be sending as an input to this classified document activity. Now, there is some interesting feature here. So UiPath has been released this newer capability. So if I click on this activity, so there is a new, I won't say new, but there is a variable partially assigned to this activity. So if you see, the color of this variable is gray, correct? So that means this variable is partially assigned to this activity. Now, can we reuse this variable? Instead of creating a new variable every time in the variables panel, can we reuse this variable? So that is why the UiPath has provided this capability, right? So we can reuse it. But how do we reuse it? So can I pass a command, hey studio, can you actually, let me to use this variable? So we can't do that. Maybe we can expect such kind of capabilities in future releases, but for now there is no such capability. So now we have to give confirmation to the studio that I'm trying to reuse this variable. So then only this variable will be permanent one, and my studio also will going to create that variable in the variables panel directly. So let's understand. So let's go into a practical way so that we will understand it very clear. Now, first of all, click on the plus button and then use variable. Select the attribute under download file activity. That's it. So this is how actually we can reuse the variable instead of creating a new variable every time. If you want, you can create a new variable. But since we have already a variable as partially created, or I would say partially assigned to this activity, so we can reuse it so that the workflow or the studio platform will make that variable as a temporary one. So if I look at the variables panel now, you see the variable has already created, right? So that means we have to tell to a studio that I'm trying to reuse it. How can we tell? So just go to a respective activity where you want to reuse and then click on the plus button, use variable and select the respective attribute so that your variable will be creating in the workflow. So without creating any new variable manually. Perfect. Pretty interesting, right? So now I have used the classified document and I have configured something within the key value. Very nice. So now the question comes, Usha, how do I know that which document is currently processing? So we have given some data in the classifier, that is fine. But how do I know? Is it an invoice or is it a credit memo or is it something else? How do I know? I will tell you. So take some message box here. Take a message box and then drag and drop to a workspace. Okay. Now the classification results will be storing in the output of this activity. Again, I want to reuse this variable. So I don't want to create a new one. So how would I do that? So just again select. So where I want to reuse, I want to use it in the message box. So first of all, you have to go there and then click on use variable, select the attribute under classified document. That's it. And as like always, the new variable got created in the variables panel. Very nice. Okay, that is fine. So I have, reuse the variable. So will this variable give me the classification result? That means will this variable will let me know that what type of document is the bot currently processing? No. So there is something that we have to add, which is dot. Okay. So the moment I click on dot, so there are a lot of attributes coming up. Select the document type dot Okay, and then select the name. Now let's see what this output will give. So what what value this will going to print, we will see. So that way we will understand. So I'm running the workflow. Instead of talking in a theoretical way, if we go into a practical, so that would be more helpful for us to understand better. So the very first one is executed. So it was able to download the file, and now it is classifying the document. So have we done any additional configurations for classification, guys? No, right? So now if you see, it has written something called invoice. So did we see it somewhere? So let's look into it. So remember, so what it has given the value as invoice. Now if I go to prompt, right? So this is the key that the message box has written. What's your understanding on this? So let me explain clear. If the document is invoice, then it will return this key. Getting it? So it will not going to return any yes or no values or something like that. If the document is invoice, it will be returning the respective key. Okay. If the document is credit memo, it will be returning the respective key. If the document is a payslip, it will be retrieving the respective key. So that is how it works. So that is how we would know what is the document that the bot has received. Okay. So now let me, for better understanding, what I do is, so let me add another entry, and then I would say non-invoice. Okay. So the key I have given as non-invoice, and uh, and the question I'm giving is not an invoice. Okay. And you may ask a question now, Usha, so is the question format should always be same? No, it's up to you. So whatever the question, whatever the statement that you give, it's up to you. Okay. So here I have given not an invoice, right? So now let's observe the output. I'm clicking on save. Okay. And now we will run the workflow and then see what it will give. So before doing that, let me change the file here. Okay. So previously I have given this one. So the bot has identified as invoice. Now let's go to a next one. So let me select this file and then see what the result we will get. So I'm going to select the third file and then click on save. Very nice. Now let's run the process. So it has successfully downloaded the file, and now it is executing the classified document activity. Perfect. So if you see what is the value it has written, non-invoice. Now what is the understanding, guys? So understanding the root concepts is very, very important. So if I look at the prompt, so I have given the key as non-invoice and I asked, not an invoice? Yes, because it is not an invoice, right? So it is not an invoice, it is some sort of certificate. So that is why it is not an invoice. Since this condition is true, since this statement is true, it has written the key as non-invoice. So this is how we can actually validate the classification results. So this is how we can actually know what is the document that the bot is currently processing. Getting it? So this way you can, add any number of entries. So for credit memo, for pay slip, or for other invoices, or for passports, for ID cards, you can add as many as entries you want. Okay. And now I don't prefer using the same question every time. So sometimes you might have to change the question. You might have to change the value, right? So it depends. It depends on how actually the GPT is understanding it. So if you're not getting the respective output with the value you provide, so I really recommend you to change the value to a different statement or a different question. So plug and play with the different questions until you get the expected output. Getting it? So now let me remove this. Okay, so since we have already tested the scenario, right? So what is the scenario that we have tested? So we have given the very first file as invoice. and the bot able to identify it as invoice. And the next we have tested with by giving this certificate, and the bot able to identify this is a non-invoice. So this is how we can actually work with a classification. Very nice. And not only that, here we can also provide the confidence score. This is something like what is the confidence score that you want to match? Is it 50 or is more than 50 or something like? You can also edit these changes. Now let me remove this one. Save. Very nice, guys. Now we understand how the classification would work. Now let's quickly jump on to a extraction. First of all, let me go back to a slide and again recall. So we have understood how the generative classifier would work, and now we have also seen how to retrieve the classification results. Now we are jumping on to a generative extractor. Now quickly go back to a studio and then search for again document. Okay.
Usha, sorry to cut you off. There was some sort of worries in chat window. Maybe if you can like answer, please do, or else like you can just answer at the end.
Yeah, maybe we can answer at the end, Kiran.
Yeah, fine, fine. No issues.
Yeah. So we have a guys, we have a separate Q&A session. So maybe we can talk about the Q&As in that specific slide. So now let's quickly go to a next activity called extract document data. Getting it? So let's get that into a workspace and then let me place this message box on top of it. Perfect. And now, again, project is predefined. And now next one is extractor. So if I click on the drop down, so you see a lot of extractors coming up, right? So it's something called invoices, ID cards, passports, pay slips, and restaurant bills, and a lot of. Now, if I go to something called invoices, so it will give you some fields which it will going to extract. So these were the fields that it can extract. Now the question comes, Usha, can we customize these fields? No, you cannot customize it. So this is a predefined extractor. So you can utilize what is the data that will extract that set. You can't customize it, and this is also non-retrainable. Getting it? So since we are focusing on gen capabilities, so let's select a generative preview option. Very nice. Now let's go to a prompt. So here we have to again configure the key value pairs. I will show you how we can configure. So before I configure, let me go back to my Google Drive. Okay, so this is the invoice. So now from this invoice, I want to extract a couple of fields like invoice name, due date, and then total value, and then the table data. So I want to extract these fields. Now let's quickly configure those fields here. So first of all, I want to extract the invoice number. Very nice. So I say, what is the invoice number of the document? This is my first question. Okay. And now the next field that I want to extract is due date. So here I use the similar one. I simply say, what is the due date of the document? Very nice. Now let's quickly go to our next entry, which is total value. Let me make T as capital, total value. And now I would say, what is the total due of the document? Okay. And now lastly, I want to extract the line items. And I would say, so this is a table data, right? So this is a table data I want to extract. Now we will say extract line items as a table data that includes, and then open the flower braces. So I would go for item, okay, and then comma, and then quantity. Again, close the brackets, and then within the double quotes, again, provide rate, and separated with comma, and then provide amount within the double quotes, and then finally close with the flower brace. So this is how actually we can get the table data. Extract line items as a table data that includes item, quantity, rate, and amount. So I have taken these four fields because these were generic for most of the invoices. Very nice. Now let's click on save. Done. So now once it is done, so we have to provide again the input file. So what is the input file guys? The file that we download from our Google Drive. So that means the output of this activity will become input to this. So again, how do I reuse the variable? Just click on use variable and then select the attribute under download. Very nice. Okay. Now the next thing is, now we have learned how to configure the key values in extract document data activity. Now we will see how to get the extracted values we will see. For that, I will take some message box. And before that, let me take a sequence so that it would be easy to copy wherever we want. And now let me take a message box. So here, what I do is, so generally, where is the extraction result stored, guys? So within the output variable. Now, can we reuse this variable? Again, the same concept. So this variable is partially assigned to this activity. If you want, reuse it, go to a respective activity, right? And then where you want to reuse, and then select the variable. So this is the one. Select extraction results attribute under extract document data. Very nice. Now, will it going to give the value? No. So we have to do some other changes. So dot, okay. And I would say that data, select the data attribute and again dot, okay. So the moment I click on dot, you see the values that we have configured at extraction level so that we can see those values. Invoice number, line items, total, and the due date. So first of all, let's go with the invoice number. Okay. And then dot choose string. So for better understanding, what I do is I will add some customized message, invoice number, and then ampersand the respective value. Very nice. Now let's copy the message box and now try to print the due date. So I say something called here due date. And then here, again, the same expression dot data dot uh, due date dot toString. Okay. Now let's copy the same message box and then try to get another value, which is total. And then here I will change variable name dot data dot total dot toString. Perfect. And now let's copy the another message box. So for line items, so I would say as line items. And then here I will change variable dot data dot line items dot toString. Very nice. Now we will start executing this workflow and then we will see what is the extracted data that comes. So again, as like I mentioned earlier, guys, so the value that you are given in the prompt is not restricted to any format. So you can plug and play with different statements, with different questions until you get a expected output. So here, first activity execution is done. Now it is classifying the document. Okay. We will fix it. It says unknown. We will fix it. Now it is extracting the data. My bad. So here I have not changed the file name. So I have given the certificate, right? So this is the file that I have given. So that is why we are not getting the extracted fields. Now let me change the file name here. Let me select the first file. So invoice 198872. So from this specific document, there is no invoice number and all. So that is where the bot not able to extract. Now let's test with this. So let me execute it again. So it is now classifying the document. So again, the execution time for this, it depends upon the document that you provide, right? So if you see here, so the bot or the platform is able to identify the document as invoice. So this is coming from their classification, right? So we have configured few key values in the classified document activity, right? So if it is invoice, then it will return the specific key. If it is credit memo, then it will return the specific key. So now it has returned the key as invoice. That means the bot able to identify it as invoice. Now it is doing the extraction part. Very nice. Now let's validate the fields. So this is the invoice number 198,782. And now it has extracted the due date, right? And now it has extracted the total value, which is 500. And now it has extracted the table data. If you see how the table data is looks like, pretty interesting, right? So the table data is separated with a tab. Okay, line items, I would say item, separated tab, and then quantity, rate, and amount. And the values are computer 1, 500, and 500. So this is how the table data captured. Very nice. Now let's understand a different scenario, which is what happens if I change the format of question? So will the output going to vary? Or will it give the same output? We will see. Okay, so this way you guys would able to understand. It's not every time we give the same question format or same statement. So the moment we change the question, so the output will also vary. So that scenario we will look into now. Okay, so that we will be understanding more better. Now what I do is I will remove this. Okay, so I just say as extract line items that includes item, quantity, rate, and amount. Now let's quickly save it. So now here another change comes. The moment you edit something, either in classification or the extraction prompts, so what happens is the variable will get reset. That means the variable will be deleting automatically. Getting it? So the moment you change or you add a new entry, even in the classification prompt or in the extraction prompt, so the variable will be deleting automatically. So then you will get a error messages wherever you have used that variable. Now, how do we sort out that issue? So instead of going to each and every activity and then changing the variable name, just take a message box, okay, and then select the respective argument under the activity, select this, and then all the error messages were gone. So this is one of a small trick, okay? So instead of going to each and every activity and changing, you can just take a message box and then select the respective variable so that the error messages will gone. Very nice. Now we will see this a different scenario. So before that, let me change the file name here. Okay. So now let's select the different file. So which is the second one, and the file name is this one. So I ended with 7456. Let's go back to our studio and then select the respective one. Perfect. Now we will execute and then see. So this has been executed successfully. Now it is classifying the document. And as like I mentioned, so the execution time would be a couple of seconds to a minute. So based upon the type of document that you are currently processing. So the bot has identified the document as an invoice, and now it is extracting the data from the invoice. Very nice. Now let's quickly validate it. So the very first one is the invoice number. So it gives one IW1A07456. And now the next one is due date. So it has given October 19, 2023. And now it has given the total value, which is $98. And now if you see the line items, right? So earlier, if you see the line item data, or I would say the line item format is a different way. So something like we get with a respective tab. So each and every value is separated with a tab. Now what happened? It's something like, we got in a different form. Getting it? So this is how it works. So based upon the statement or based upon the question that we provide, the output will also going to vary. Getting it, guys? So this is how it actually works. Now you understand. So if we change the question or if we change the value, the output will also going to vary, right? So now quickly go back to our studio. Now let's quickly go back to our studio. Okay. And now we will implement the action center component. So before that, what I do is, so I will simply say extract line items as a table. So again, I'm rolling back. Okay. So I have changed the question just to show you that. So if we change the question or if we change the value, the output will also going to vary. So that is why I'm telling you guys. So if you don't get a expected output with the value that you have given, so try to plug and play with the different statements or with the different questions. Okay. And now let's quickly save it. So again, we see that error coming up. So what is the resolution for this? So just take a message box and then select the attribute under the activity and then save it so that the error messages will go on and now receive the, delete the additional message box. Very nice. Now we will build a action center component. Okay. So before I do that, so let me again run the workflow. Okay. So again, I'm back to my previous value. So I'm back to my previous question. So I have given extract line items as a table that includes item, okay, quantity, rate, and amount. Now what I do is, so I will run the workflow for again two invoices. So let me quickly run with the first one. So before we implement the action center component, okay. So why I'm showing, I will let you know. So first of all, let's run it and then observe the output. Then we will implement action center component. So now it is classifying the document. Pretty interesting, right? So without doing any labeling part and all, so we're just doing some simple configurations and we are getting the data. Cool. So now it is extracting the data. Fine, so it has extracted the invoice number. So this is the invoice currently we are processing. So due date, total, and we have got the table data in a different format, right? So separated with the tab. So last invoice we got in a different format. Now it is in a different format. Very nice. Now let's quickly execute the next invoice. Okay. So this is the invoice that we will execute now. That what I do is, so I will just go here and then select the respective file and then click on save. If you go with the scenario based, right? So that way you guys will be understanding more better. So if we are really good at our roots, so definitely you can plug and play with the advanced uh, enhancements or the capabilities that comes with generative capabilities. But the understanding of basics is very, very important. Now it is classifying the document. So it has identified the document as an invoice. And now it is extracting the data. Okay. And we have got invoice number, we have got due date, we have got total, and the line item data is empty. See this magic, guys. So earlier, earlier we have executed the same invoice, right? So with a different question. So then I got the data. But now if I execute the same invoice, right? So with a different question, I'm not getting it. So this actually clearly helps you to understand based upon the question that we give. So you will get output. Getting it? So now keeping this scenario in mind, so I'm going to build a action center component. So for the previous invoice, the bot able to extract all the fields. And for this invoice, the bot failed to extract the line item data. So now can we build the action center component based upon this? So definitely we can build it, guys. Even in the real time implementation, you have to do the same. So what is the thing that we have to do? I will let you know. Okay. So first of all, let me click on OK. Now here, the table data is not extracted, right? So though the table data is not extracted, should I go ahead and then process it? No, right? So what we have to do? We have to send to our action center for human validation. So that we are going to see it now. So for the previous invoice, okay, so all the fields were extracted. But for this invoice, the table data is missing. So I want to send this to Action Center. Even in your real implementation use cases, make sure you do the same. Okay, so make a list of mandatory fields, like invoice number is a mandatory field. So without invoice number, can we do anything? No, right? So you can take purchase order as a mandatory field. So without PO number, can we do anything? No. So the table data is a mandatory field. So without table data, can we process that invoice? No. So the total value is also mandatory field. So if the bot not able to extract it, should we go ahead and process it? No. So these we can have a list of mandatory fields. So if you were doing any use case with the invoice processing, make sure you contain or you maintain a set of mandatory fields. If any of that field is missing, make sure you send that invoice to Action Center. So this is the best practice that you have to maintain in your use cases. It's not blindly processing the document, right? So we have to maintain these conditions in our coded workflow. I would say in our studio workflow, and based upon that, we have to take the respective actions. Now let's go back to our studio. Now I'm going to implement that scenario. Okay. So for that, what I do is I will take some if condition. I will take some if condition. So here I want to check whether the table data got extracted or no. So if the table data is not extracted, then I would like to send that invoice to Action Center. So let's make a condition. Okay. So now what is the variable that I have to use? So where is the extraction result stores case? So within this variable, right? So now let's reuse the variable here. So use variable, then select the attribute under extract document data, and now say as data that we already learned, right? So how to print the extracted values. And now what is the attribute that I would like to validate is line items dot toString. So now I have converted this value to string format. Now I can implement string dot is null or empty condition. So without converting the way this data to string format, so if you implement string dot empty, so it will give you an error. So first of all, make sure you convert this to string, then implement this condition. Very nice. Now, if this is empty, what I want to do? I want to send the invoice to Action Center. So again, search for the document so that you will be getting all the activities. So here, I will take an activity called create validation task. So the name itself says create validation task. That means it will going to create a task in the human, in Action Center for human validation. So here we have to provide the extracted data. So where is the extracted data is storing? So within this variable, right? So now let's pass that variable here again. So I would say that select extraction results attribute. Very nice. And action type. So I would say as validate. Perfect. Now let's ignore output for some time. Okay. Now let's quickly go to our next activity called wait for validation task and resume. So the name itself says, so it will going to wait until the, invoice validation completes in Action Center. Okay. So now here we have to provide an input called created document validation task. Now, where is this coming from? The output of previous activity is the input to this activity. Now, can I reuse the same variable? Again, the same concept, reusing of the variables instead of creating the variable manually. So let's select it, use variable, and then, select this one, which is under create validation task. So this is the activity name. Select this attribute. Perfect. Very nice. So now we are, actually sending the invoice to Action Center, and we are waiting for the action to complete in Action Center. Okay. Now I want to print the human validated values or human validated data. So I have taken this sequence and then copied here. So I'm going to make some change in the variable name. Okay. So now the question comes, where is the human validated data stores? So in this variable, because this is the activity, right? So this activity actually makes the workflow to wait until the validation completes. Which validation? Invoice validation. By whom? By human. Okay. So once the invoice is sent back to the studio, the human corrected data or the human validated data will be storing into this variable. Now we can use this variable to see what are the values that human corrected or validated. Okay. So for that, I'm just taking a message box and then clear value. So I'm going to reuse the same variable here. So again, use variable and then say as validated extraction results. Very nice. Now, will it going to enough? So will it going to give us a value, guys? No. So what additional things we have to do? So dot data dot. So what is the attribute that we want to print? I mean, what is the value that we want to print? Invoice number, okay, dot to string. So again, for better understanding, what I do is I will add some custom message here. Invoice number after validation. So I say after validation and then ampersand. Very nice. So this way you would be understanding what is the data that comes after validation. Now I'm going to copy the entire thing here in the second message box. And this time I want to print due date after validation. So I say as due date. And here I have to change the key to due date. Again, variable name dot data dot the respective key and then dot string. That's it. And now I do the same thing for total as well. I'll just copy here and then total after validation. And then here, what I do is I will remove the attribute and then change it to total dot string. Very nice. Now the last one is line items. So let's implement the same thing here. So copy here and then say line items after validation. And then here I want to change the attribute to line items dot string. Perfect. We are done. Okay. Now we will see. Let's execute this workflow and then see. Now you may ask, okay, Usha, so if the value is empty, then you are sending to action center and then printing some values. So what if the bot able to extract the data? So we don't need to do anything separately. So let me take message bot. So for our understanding purpose and then say as all fields were extracted. Very nice. Now let's execute this workflow and then understand very clear. So before that, let me change the file name. I'm forwarding every time. So let me change the file name to first invoice. Okay, so the very first invoice. So this is the invoice that we are currently executing. And then let's learn from the output. So what is the output is coming and how it is coming. So all we will learn from it. So first the download file. So it is executed and now it is classifying the document. And now it has identified the data as an invoice. And now it is doing some extraction. So it has extracted the invoice number, has extracted the due date, it has extracted the total, and also the table data. The format is like separated with a tab, and we have to perform some data table operations to copy it into a Excel. So that is again the different part. So all fields were extracted, right? So now let's quickly go back to a studio and then see what are the blocks those were executed. So first it has executed downloading file classification, extraction, and then if I go to a if condition, so here it has validated the condition. Since all the fields were extracted, so it has executed the else block. Very nice. So this is as expected, isn't it? So now let's quickly go to a next file. So let me go here and then select the other file, and then we will see what is the output this time we will get. So I'm selecting the next file, which this is also invoice, but this is a different format of invoice. Now you guys understood, right? So it's not everything, it's not every time we can maintain the same format of invoice. So with the generative capabilities. So you see, we are currently working with a different format of invoices, right? So that is how it can actually handle the invoices. And now I'm executing the code. So the activity is executed. Now it is classifying the document. Once you understand the basics, now you can plug and play with it, right? So even in the classifier, while we are classifying the document, we can maintain some conditions. So if it is not an invoice, just send to action center or stop the process or log message. So whatever it is. So that when comes, so that only you can implement when you understand the basic concept, right? So how it works, what way it works, in what way it gives the output. So if you understand all these things, that would be helpful for you to build, I would say that, even the complicated use cases. So here it has given invoice number, and then it has given the due date, and now it has given the total value, which is $98. And if you see the line item data is, for some reason, my bot is not able to extract the line item data. Now, in this case, what I'm doing is, so we are sending this invoice to Action Center. So this is the effective way of implementing your use cases in real-time implementation. Okay, so now let's go back to the studio and then let's click on OK. Now what it is doing, so it is actually validating the condition here. Since the value is empty, now it has created a task in Action Center for the human to validate. And this I already told you. So this activity makes our workflow to suspend or to pause. So if you see, it has given a message. Execution is suspended and is waiting for external events to complete. So now what we have to do? Let's go back to our Action Center. So I have already told you how to enable the Action Center service, right? So once you go to our Action Center, go to your inbox. It's not email inbox, it's a Action Center inbox. Now go to unassigned. You can see the tasks, right? So the very first thing that you have to do is assign to self. Okay. Now switch to pending tab, and you can validate the results, or you can validate the fields. So it has extracted invoice number, perfect, due date, fantastic, total, very nice, and then it failed to extract the line item data. Now what I do, I will just label this whole thing and then assign this to field. That's it. This is how we have to do. There is no something called table data option here, guys. So if you have already worked with intelligent form extractor, right, or form extractor, so you can see something called table data option in Action Center. But when coming to the generative capabilities for now, so there is no table data option. So all you have to do is select the data and then assign to the field. Okay. Now I have submitted. I would say that so everything looks good. So I submitted the invoice. Now it will be sending to the robot. Again, the robot picks up and then continues where it left off. Now let's go back to our studio and then let's resume our process. So this is pretty interesting, right? So stopping it sometime and then for the human to validate and then continuing with the next steps. So this is how efficiently we can build our automations. Now, what is the data we have retrieved? So we are trying to retrieve here the data after the validation, after the human review, after the human validation, after the human corrected data. So the first thing we have got is invoice number after validation. So we have get it. And the next one is due date after validation. So which is October 19, we get it. And the next one is total value after validation, $98. And you see here, we also got a table data. It says reams of paper, one, and then rate is 100, and then amount is 100. Pretty interesting, right? So the moment I click on OK, so it simply stops the execution. So this is how we can implement Action Center components. So not only the values, guys, you can also, print the confidence of each value. So let me also show you that how it can be done. So I would say invoice number confidence after validation. So instead of, okay, so the variable name dot data dot invoice number, and finally, instead of dot toString, let's say confidence. That's it. And now let me do it for the due date as well. So here, for our understanding, I'm mentioning confidence, and at the end, remove dot toString to confidence. Perfect. And now let's quickly go to our next one. So here I copy and then I will print the confidence. Total confidence after validation. And here I remove dot toString and then I say confidence. And finally, I'm printing the line items data. So here, line items confidence after validation. So here, remove dot toString and then say confidence. Very nice. So this is how actually we can print a confidence. Again, let's execute the workflow and then understand, is it giving expected output or no? So let's go here and then start the execution. So this is how we can work with the generative capabilities, because you don't need to do anything literally. So you have to understand the functionality, right? And everything will be taken care by the GPT. So the moment you provide the data, it will be sending to a GPT and then with a single request. And after that, you will be getting a expected output. So it has identified the invoice and then it is extracting the data now. And it has extracted invoice number. So this is what? This is actually sent before sending to action center. So due date extracted, total extracted, and the line item is missing. So since the line item data is not extracted, so we are sending this invoice to action center, right? I'm repeating the same step because just to make sure we are clear at every point. So now let's go back to our action center, and then the very first step is go to inbox and then unassigned. So you have got a task now assigned to self, and then go to a pending tab. Now quickly validate the fields. Perfect. So all the fields were extracted except line item. So just, select the line item data and then submit the invoice. Very nice. Now let's go back to our studio and then resume the process. Now what it will going to print? It will going to print the human validated data, right? So invoice number and then invoice number confidence after validation is 1. 1 means 100%. Okay. So the confidence score will varies between 0 to 1. If it is 0.5, 50%, 0.7, 70%. If it is 100%, right, guys? So even in your real-time use cases, you can send invoices to Action Center based upon the extracted feeds confidence as well. So it is also one of the best practice. Or if any of the mandatory fields, as like I mentioned earlier, make a list of mandatory fields. I need invoice number, I need this field, I need PO number, right? So if any of those fields were missing, make sure you send to Action Center. So now let's go with the next. So value, so due date extracted and due date confidence after validation is 1. And again, no, total value is $98 and total value confidence after validation is 1. And finally, line items after validation. So this is the data that the human corrected. And now what is the confidence is 1. So this is how we can implement the workflows using the generative capabilities. So if you use any platform like document understand, I would say that, the previous document understanding package or any platform if you use, so most of the cases, or I would say a few of the cases, bot will not able to extract or classify the data. So make sure you implement a best practice, including the human, or I would say action center in your workflows, right? And also after extraction, make sure you implement two conditions according to your requirement. The first one is you can validate the data based upon its confidence score, or you can validate the data like, something like, is it correctly extracted or if any of the field is missing. So if it is missing, again send to Action Center. If the confidence score is less than 50%, again send to Action Center. So implementing these type of business rules, or I would say in your use case, so it will make your workflow so efficient and effective, right? So I'm pretty sure that your client will going to impress a lot if you implement such kind of conditions in your work. Very nice, guys. Now we have understand how we can use generative classifier and how we can actually know what type of document what is processing, and we also understand the generative extractor, how to retrieve the extracted data, and then based upon what conditions, and we also discussed about a few of the best practices including Action Center for human validation, right? So this is what I would like to talk, and now let's quickly move on to our next slide. So I would like to talk about a few couple of things like academy, and please go through a academy, UiPath Academy. And if you are a beginner, it helps you to understand the product functionality. And if you are an experienced person, it helps you to understand, something like the newest releases and the newest products that were launched recently. You would be able to understand the end-to-end functionality. And forum, as always, the forum will give you a helping hand when you're stuck at automation, and also it gives you an opportunity to contribute to the users, so that way you can improve your technical expertise. And community events, if you are a person who is looking to update yourself, so make sure you register to your local chapter and don't forget to attend the event. And so I need a small picture, so now I will stop sharing. Okay, so if can you please, I would say that turn on your cameras, so that if anyone is interested, please turn on your camera so that we can take a picture. Kiran, can you please capture a picture?
Sure, 1 minute. Just go on. Yeah, I think we are good.
Oh, thank you, Kiran. Let me reshare my screen again. Perfect. So, this is my LinkedIn QR code. If you want to connect, please scan this QR code so we can connect and then see how we can help each other. So now let's quickly move on to a Q&A session. So before I go for it, if you find this session helpful, so make sure you just share a post in a LinkedIn, so tagging your pet community and the organizers and the moderators and me. So this would be very helpful to the users who want to learn more on the gen capabilities, and also it would be helpful to maintain or to handle such kind of webinars in the future. Okay, so if anybody wants to ask a question, so you can unmute yourself and then ask it. So meanwhile, I will look into the some questions in the chat window. Feel free to talk, guys.
I think maybe I'll just stop the recording. Maybe we can just go with the queries and we can just wind up the event, since we have
Sure,
left with the last 5 minutes.
sure. So one question is,